Ready? All right. The Lord be with you. And also with you. That statement is usually followed by a prayer, but today it will not be followed by a prayer. It will be followed by a gospel presented by the one Reverend John Stone Jenkins. This whole process started probably 2 months ago. I queried Lynn to see if John would be willing to sit down and have a conversation with me about his experience in World War II. It has grown into what John is going to offer us today as a community. And if you've never heard him speak, you're in for a treat. If you've heard him speak, your expectations are high, and I know he will deliver. It's all yours, Father.
Thank you. Well, the last time I spoke at this church, I think I lost my pants. We wear those white robes, and I felt something loose on my pants, and I looked down and they were going down past my knees and then wrapped around my shoes at the bottom. And Lynn was in the choir in those days. And I said, Lynn, you better come up here, we got a problem. So she did, and took them out and held them up for the congregation to see my pants on. She didn't need to do that, but she did it. And I went to the back of the church and put my pants on and came down and said, I was in the middle of my sermon. Where was I? I didn't know. Speaking about that, another funny little thing. Charlie, is it Charlie Horn? Well, Charlie and I, for a while, we were dubbing us, we were both filling in because there wasn't a rector here then. And I got in the middle of the prayer of consecration of the bread and the wine, and I looked up to the congregation or something. I looked back down, and I couldn't find it. So I leaned over to Charlie and I said, Charlie, do you know where we are in this prayer? He said, I hadn't the slightest idea. So I said, well, I'm just going to start wherever my finger goes down. Well, anyway, now I want to, before I get into where I was going to start, tell you one thing. Well, two things. There was in the Vietnam War, which you all know was in its heyday in the late 60s and early 70s, after I was already ordained as a priest of the church. But anyway, this had nothing to do with me, but there was a general of the army, and I saw this, so this was on television, so I know it's accurate. So anyway, this general was being interviewed, and he said, we know that you were a young lieutenant in the Vietnam War, weren't you? He said, yes, I was. He said, well, you were going to talk about that war today, but he said, well, before I start, I have to forewarn you that the older I get, and he was in his 80s now. Is anybody here over 98? No? Well, I'll be 98 in 2 months, so. Anyway, he said, the older I get, you want me to go back and talk about the Vietnam War, the older I get, it is with greater clarity and specific things come to mind about those years that I can remember with great detail all those events that never happened. But I tell you, what I'm going to tell you today, I'm going to make sure I'll tell you when it's my opinion, and when I'm talking about, and see, it started off with talking to our deacon here that my experience, he wanted my experience in the war. So I'm weaving this into that, and so you're going to hear a lot about that. And but it's unlike the general there. Most of the things that I'm going to tell you, most of them are true. The only difficulty is I don't know which ones are true and which ones are not. I'm confused on that. But then the other thing I would like to mention first, I kept a little diary in World War II, and I understand that diary probably through my son, I don't know, but it's in the New Orleans World War II Museum down there somewhere. So my son has kept me honest about it. You stick to what you wrote back then. Then there's another little introductory point. I noticed among my generation of people that right after World War II, when I went back to LSU, I had had two years of college before the war, and we never talked about it. And my roommate, we were in the KA fraternity at LSU, and my roommate was a fellow Shreveport. I was born and raised in Shreveport, and he was too. And he later on is the inventor of the F-16 airplane.
Oh, wow.
And it was quite a feat himself. But we never discussed it. Although I did know, he told this, or his mother told me, that he was at the invasion in June, the invasion, V-Day, yeah. And going across France, he stepped on a mine and blew his leg off. And so he had a bad false leg. But we never discussed anything about it, except I knew that was it. And I've asked myself, why didn't we not talk about that then? Because in the last, I now know this is not just my story, but it's true of other men my age who were in World War II, that right now, as there are those that are still living in their 80s and 90s, we're all opening up. And I would not dare have done this right after the World War II. And I don't know why that's true. But it is true that my generation, went through a period of almost silence. And if I had to guess what's at the basis of it, when we got back, we were on our way. I was on my way to join the Pacific, bombing Japan, and when Japan surrendered with that horrible thing of the, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I think we went back to college right away, but we felt like all the girls that we knew in high school they were graduating, and here we were only going into our junior year or even sophomore year in college, and we felt we were behind schedule. And we've been a compulsive generation to get there, get a college degree, get out in the world, have your career. So that's the only reason I think we didn't talk about the war. We had an agenda to hurry up and get our education and get out in the world and catch up, because we felt that we had sort of not wasted a couple of years, 3 years, I was at 3 years. But I don't know why that's true, but we are, all of us, in the last 15 years, we have opened up and been willing to talk about it. So those are little introductory things. Now, well, that's pretty good. Now I'm going to start. But if you all that have heard me preach and stuff know that I don't believe in short sermons. I was born and raised in Shreveport in 1924. We only had 2 high schools in Shreveport, but they were big high schools. A lot of people, I think there were about 4,000 in Byrd High School. And now, Byrd High School had what was called ROTC. That's Reserve Officers Training Corporation. And all the boys you didn't have a choice. You took ROTC for 1 hour every day, and you would go down there and do it. Well, I excelled in that more than I did in chemistry. And I'm proud to say, as I got to be a senior, I was the cadet colonel in charge of the ROTC as a student leader. And then when I went off to college, I first went to Texas A&M to study petroleum engineering. And Texas A&M at that time had only male boys, and we were all in the military over there. So I had another ROTC experience. And then I realized engineering wasn't my future vocation. Matter of fact, one of the teachers said I was trying to do something on a drawing board. He leaned over to me and he said, "Don't you think there's something else you can do for a living?" Well, I took the message and got out of engineering and decided I wanted to, what can I study at Texas A&M? Well, it's only agricultural and mechanical. So I went over to LSU.
Thank God.
Yeah. And I joined the ROTC at LSU. And I was going to be ordained in the infantry as a lieutenant in about 4 months because they were drafting us then out of, when you got to be 18, you went. And I was just turned 18, my second year in college. We only went in Byrd, we were so smart, we only had 11 grades, not 12. And so, well, I had all that ROTC background, and then when it got ready for me to be drafted, I found out that if I volunteered, I could choose where I wanted to go and what branch of the service I'd be in. So I decided I'd do that. Now, I was at Texas A&M during Pearl Harbor, and we were ready to go. All of us were eager to get in the military then. And I went to college because I was not old enough. I was just 17 years of age. I just want to mark this because it's interesting. Catch this age bit. I was 17. And after Pearl Harbor, in that following July, I was 18. I had already graduated from high school, and I was in college at 18 years of age. And Now, where was it?
Uh-huh.
That's the funny thing.
Choosing your place.
I, okay, in my head up here, because I can remember things that happened a long time ago, but things that happened, let me give you an example. Lynn, she'd get back there fooling with a dog or fooling with something in the kitchen, and then I see something on television. I say, oh, I got it. Lynn, come in. Yeah. I'll be there in a few minutes. She comes in a few minutes later. What do you want to tell me? I can't remember. I forget the things that happened 30 minutes ago, but I can remember things that happened 30 years ago. I can remember with a reasonable degree of accuracy. Well, I said, I want to go into the infantry, and I'd like to, if possible, go to the 82nd Airborne Division and be a paratrooper. They said, I'm sure you can get into that. Not many people volunteer for that. Well, I was so full of that on my ROTC ever since the 8th grade in high school, I could do drilling and everything else. So they said, well, we'll do it. Either that or the 101st Airborne, it would be good. So I was scheduled, and I went in and they sent me to Florida, and down there we drilled and did a lot of things. And then one day they came in and read out a list of names, and they said, and my name was on the list. And they said, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to the Fort Benning and join the infantry? And I said, you're going to the Air Force. I said, oh, God, I don't want to go to no Air Force. Terrible. And they said, listen, I happen to know why they're doing this. You have no choice. They're losing over Germany so many B-17s that the Air Force is depleted, and they got to refill it. Right? So you're going into the Air Force, and you're going to fly in probably a B-17. I said, that's terrible. So they said, well, see, you have 2 years of college, and you have all this ROTC experience. You could get an opportunity to say, rather than just being drafted in as an enlisted man, you can go to training as a pilot or a navigator or a bombardier. Those are the three officers on these bombers, heavy bombers. And I said, well, I sure don't want to be a pilot. I couldn't fly a pilot. Please make note of that, because it comes up later on. Well, I mean, I'll tell you right quick, because otherwise I'll forget it. Where was I?
You didn't want to be a pilot.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't want to be a pilot. Oh, yeah. Yeah, right. I'll let it, it's going to come up later. So I said, I like navigation. I did some navigation to be an infantry officer. And that doesn't seem to be possible now. So but I go to navigation school. They said, fine. So I did. And went to navigation school And that put me, so I wasn't ready. I graduated in close to it, but for navigation, so I was commissioned as a second lieutenant, the navigator. And then I was back to Florida and joined the crew down there, which was my crew, going to England. And we went over on a ship. It was the Ile-de-France, which was a French cruise line ship. And one interesting point, the British staffed that ship, and although it was a French ship before the war, and we officers had wonderful quarters. And one night, I went downstairs where the enlisted men were, and there was 5 deep on bunks, 5 cots high, hanging by ropes. And then on another night, I was a little restless, and so I went up on my deck and went out on the deck of the ship in dark night, and I looked over, and here was this young boy. I was no older than he was. I was just 19. I was 19 by then. And he was crying. And he had a rifle. And I said, "What's wrong? What's wrong with you?" And I knew he was an enlisted man. He said, "I just have been drafted into the military, and I'm in the infantry." I said, "Oh, damn, that's where I ought to be." And he said, "I got this rifle, and I've got bullets, but I don't know how to shoot it, and I don't know how to load it." Well, in the ROTC, we used actual, we had a firing range. Even at Byrd High School, we were firing live ammunition underneath the stadium. And so I knew I could take that rifle apart. And I said, "Well, come here, let me show you something." And so we loaded it up and went out to looking over the water, black night, and started shooting it. And then I gave it to him to just shoot it. And he did it. And he thanked me profusely for doing that. I feel bad, but I just want to pass that on to show you how sometimes things get screwed up and we don't train people too fast, too good, and put them in harm's way when they should. But in war, those things happen. Those things happen in war. So we landed up in Scotland and went on a train down to eastern England, not far from the English Channel, and in a little town called Sudbury. And we got in there, and we knew who our crew was. But we had flown together as a crew in Florida once or twice for the ship to South. But we were not very well prepared. And they called us up, "You're flying tomorrow morning," right away. And we'd only been there a day or two, maybe. They said, "You're going on a special mission." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, you're not going to carry any bombs. And why are we going then? He said, you're going to carry shredded tinfoil. He said, well, what's that about? Well, go into the briefing room. And we went in there. We were the only crew in there. They said, we have figured out the reason that the Germans are shooting down these B-17s so fast, so many, they have good radar. The Germans were way advanced over the Allies in the technology of machinery, of war machinery, and in their tanks, in their airplanes, and all of that. And what we found out is that their radar was so good that they could measure exactly where if they could put the radar on the bottom of the bombers going over, and we were all going in formation, and we flew by companies. The company had about 4 platoons of bombers, and that it would be about 60 B-17s in a bomb group, and they could get underneath that with a radar and figure out they're flying at 28,000 feet high, and they could almost get it down to the foot where it was. And then they'd sharpen their anti-aircraft things, and boom, knock the plane out of the sky. But you're going to fly 2,000 feet beneath your buddies above, and in the place of the bomb, you have this shredded tinfoil, and you take that and throw it out, and that tinfoil will catch their radar, and they cannot see anything above where that radar started. I said, well, okay. So we got, now, we got across the English Channel, and we could see our bombers up above us, 2,000 feet. So if they were at 28, we were about 26,000 feet. B-17 wouldn't fly past 30,000 feet. It just couldn't do it. It just couldn't do it. And so now when the radar, the German radar would figure out, because that's exactly where the tinfoil started. Well, guess what? That's where we were. I later learned that this program of the tinfoil was only about 2 weeks old. And it only lasted about another 2 weeks.
Oh.
But nobody ever came back, because the Germans knew exactly where that was reflected on their screen. And so they would shoot that, thinking that was the bombers. It wasn't. It was people throwing tinfoil out, and they would only do it. And the reason they only had one arch plane that day was the people from yesterday didn't come back. So that was interesting news. Now, when anti-aircraft go off from the ground and would explode, if it would explode within, say, any area in this room, that far apart from where I'm sitting, it would shake the B-17 and knock it up like that, just by the explosion. But also, the bomb that they had sent up to it would break into iron things, pieces of iron about the size of a baseball, and it would tear into the planes and come right through the fuselage of the airplane. Or if it was worse, hit the engine and kill the engine. Well, you see these black things, and then black smoke would come out where the bomb was. And our bomb group up above was having a piece of cake. And we were having it bad. And I learned later why it was that they gave us the oldest, most decrepit, worn-out B-17 on the base, because they figured he ain't probably coming home. And that's right. It was 49 degrees Fahrenheit minus zero. 49 degrees, cold. And I remember when you got to 15,000 feet going up, you had to wear an oxygen mask. And that oxygen mask, we had saliva, we'd have to break it off. Break off the ice off your chin. And then the bomb would hit and turn the plane halfway over. And then we would get into Germany, and we were trying to follow a plane, but sometimes everything was in our plane was like the outside temperature, and so the windows of the B-17, the windows iced over, and we couldn't see. So we had a hard time staying with our bomb group upstairs, so we tried to, I was the navigator. I didn't know a damn thing about how to do that navigation. Now see, well, I'm tearing. That's another little people ask me, John, were you ever shaken up while you were flying? Well, I'll talk about that a little bit later. But no, I wasn't. We couldn't see. But funny thing about it is, in a way, we weren't traumatized by that. We knew what we had to do. Throw the tinfoil out, throw the tinfoil. And then all of a sudden, one of the engines you'd see it out front, and the pilot would say, I can't see out through the window. And, excuse me, but he would call and say, can y'all come up here and urinate on the window? Which we did, trying to melt the ice so it could see where the bombers were above us. The only trouble is the urine froze. Now it was yellow. And then we lost in RB-17, and the radio went out. So we couldn't talk to the people, and 9 people on our crew, 3 officers, and the rest were an engineer and a turret on top, and another person on a turret on the bottom, and then 3 people in the midship, and everybody had 50 caliber machine guns, everybody. And there was a tail gunner back there, yeah. But when the plane when an engine would get hit, it would catch fire, and a B-17 can fly on 3 engines. It has 4 normally, but it could fly on 3 engines, but it couldn't go up, but it could stay level. But when it lost the second engine, it would slowly come down. The pilot couldn't keep it up. And if it lost 3 engines, it was curtains. You knew that. But we tried hard, and we scratched on the windows to try to see. And it was we lost 3 engines. They were all on fire. And then the fire got somehow back into the back of the plane. And it was burning. And the plane was filling with smoke. And pilot kept saying, because we had a communication between the pilot, which was above us, and then we were in the nose of the B-17, which was all glass in the front, plexiglass. And they would ask, "Where are we?" I didn't know where we were. I'm the navigator. I was supposed to know. I said, "Oh, I think we're okay. We're over France." We weren't. Turns out, this was in the middle of what is called the Battle of the Bulge at Bastogne. And that was one of the bloodiest. That was Hitler's last effort to break through the American lines. And he nearly succeeded with it. Well, the plane was so burning, the pilot was losing total control. And we started going down, and we were circling, and the pilot said, "I can't control the plane." And we were going into a tailspin, circling around like this, going down, and about this angle. And I said to the pilot, "We better get out of this plane. We can't. It's going to blow up. I know it's just bound to blow up." And he said, "Well, tell all the people in the back to put on their parachutes." Well, we had to locate the parachutes. We didn't think we'd ever use them, but we did. And I had to go back there. We had little portable oxygen masks, oxygen bottles. And I got mine and went back to the middle of the ship and I said, we're getting ready to jump out. And it was how are you going to jump out with a plane like that, spiraling down? I had to do it. I have to do it. Well, they called me to come back out there. I went back and they said, the tail gunner is out there in the middle of the ship. There's a door on each side of the B-17. And he was stuck in the door and wouldn't move. Excuse me. I just put my foot in his back and booted him out. I have no idea if he ever opened his chute. Went back up and the bombardier had already gone where we had the tinfoil, which was in the Bombay bomb area. And the bomb, those bottom of the plane, the doors would like that, and that's how you drop the bombs out. Or you can throw the tinfoil out that way too. And the pilot and the co-pilot and the bombardier had gone ahead of us and jumped out through the Bombay door. And the pilot and I went together. And we stood with our feet spread apart, the smoke coming everywhere. The plane was on fire. And I looked down, and over on where the Bombay door was out that way, on the edge of it was a ripped piece of a uniform. And there I could see a wallet still in his back pocket. And I knew it was the bombardier. He had caught on the door, and it ripped his pants and wallet out, and it stuck there on the door. Well, and people say, John, were you ever scared? See, I don't remember being scared. As a matter of fact, right there, excuse me, this is, I'm sorry you're on the tape. We even had kind of a sense of humor. I did. My pilot did a little, I thought. Because I told him his name was Arthur, and then we called him Art. Art, you've heard the old expression, you got the piss scared out of you? Can you pee? Can you pee? Let's try. So, see, here we are, acting like fools when we know we're about to die. And pulled it out, and I said, I can't pee. Neither can I. No. We gave up on that. And they had told us if you ever jump out of a plane, count 10 on the B-17, count 10 before you pull your cord to open the chute. because you didn't have it attached to anything up at top, like the paratroopers do. So Art went out, and he went out to the bomb bay doors, and I went out, and I counted to 5. I said, "That's enough." And I pulled it like that. I realized, I don't know that I realized anything, but I was head down. And when the chute opened, what do you think happened? Well, I had an officer's .45 pistol up here. I had a kit up here that had a little consolidated food, candy, cheese, and chocolate, and a map of the route that we were taking. I never heard of the Battle of the Bulge, but that's exactly where we were, on top of Bastogne. That's right on the borderline between Germany and Belgium. And when I went, and my chute opened, and it jerked me around so hard, I lost all of that stuff, went out, and I didn't have anything left. And there was a cloud level below us. We were at 15,000 feet when I jumped out. And my chute did open. I didn't see any of my fellow passengers of my crew. And when we went in the clouds, at about 12,000 feet up above, my chute collapsed because of the wind currents in the clouds. And I just jerked on the cords, and it finally opened. I mean, it finally filled back up. But that was the closest I came. And we came out of the clouds, and I was right on top of a wooded forest. And I knew I was coming down through thick trees. So I crossed my legs. You ladies don't know why, but you would have been glad I did. And I have 2 children to prove. Landed in the snow, crashing through the limbs of the trees. And because it was in December, right near the first of the year. And I got out of that. Well, and then I thought, what am I going to do? Now, they had told us if you get shot down, do not surrender to the German lay people. Surrender to the German army. They will put you in a POW place. Because if you do get caught by the lay people, you've been bombing those lay people, and they will kill you right away. But the military will put you in a prisoner of war camp. So I said, well, that's good to know. I went over and I found a little 2-track dirt road, I thought. Well, it was snow, but there was some tire tracks on that road. And I went down the road and started down. I went around a curve and I saw a sign up there, the name of this village up there. And it had a word in the name of the village and an umlauted O. You know what an umlaut means? There's 2 dots above it. So I said, that's not French. I knew a little French. But, so I turned around and went the other way. Came back and I looked up and down there, here came a vehicle down this little road. I thought, oh God, if that's a German town down there, these must be German people. So I jumped and got off of the road. And then I said, no, I got to give myself up because that's the only way I'm going to get out of here if I'm going to make it. So I got up and raised my hands up like I said, and it looked like a Jeep, you know, and there was a man sitting in the shotgun side of the seat that he was, he had a strange uniform on. And he came up and I started trying to speak French to him. He pulled out a pistol and put it right up against my head like that, press it on it. And he started jabbering in French. But he was talking so fast, I couldn't understand his French. Anyway, but I looked in the back of the seat in the Jeep, and there were 2 guys back there that looked to me like they had American uniforms on. And I said, aren't you American? Is that a uniform? He said, yes. Well, see, they had told us that the Germans had gotten a lot of, when they killed American soldiers, they took their uniform off, and then Hitler put some of his advanced soldiers dressed as Americans to lead in the Battle of the Bulge to get through the American line by wearing American uniforms. And so I said, well, are you American? He said, yeah. I said, well, you sound like you're from the South, your voice. He said, yeah, I'm from Wascom, Texas. I said, what? God, that's only 20 miles out of Shreveport, Louisiana. He said, yeah, I know that. Well, holy mackerel, where are you? You from Shreveport? I said, yes, I am. Well, tell this son of a bitch to take that pistol out of my head. And who the hell is he anyway? They said, well, he's a reconnaissance person, but he's connected to the French army. So they let me in the Jeep, and we went down. They said, well, the little town you got is in the hands of our infantry. So we went in. I said, you got to get down on your belly and crawl on the floor, because the Germans are just in the barn that's no further away than the kitchen here. And we were shooting each other. And somebody said, you won't take a rifle and shoot? Not especially. Yeah. Pretty soon, the guy said, I'm from the Stars and Stripes or whatever that American little newspaper was in there. And he said, may I interview you? I said, we're down on the floor on our belly. And here I've been trying to wet my pants before and couldn't do that. What do you think I'm going to talk to you about? What do you mean talk about? What I had for breakfast today? I said, no, I don't, please. I'm a little nervous here. And he said, well, I'm going back with the Jeep back to company headquarters. You want to go back with me? I said, yes, I sure think that's a good idea. So we went back, and it was, and they put me in a farmhouse with a major in the American Army, and I know this is terrible to say, but he had a big bottle of cognac, and we got so drunk. I apologize to you all, because, priests don't do that. Well, anyway, that was it. And I'm going long enough. I got to hurry up and get to do, huh? Yeah, I know it. Yeah. Went back and we went to sleep and said, all of a sudden we heard this bombing going. And I jumped and I said, what's that? And the major said, that's our military. That's our artillery. And we're laying it into the Germans just over the top of the hill here. They're doing that. I said, oh, that's good. All right. So then went to sleep, we woke up again, and I heard bombing again. Bang, 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 bang. I said, we just laying it into them. It's so good. Went back to sleep. Trouble was, that wasn't our artillery. That was the German artillery firing back. I didn't realize that. But I woke up the next morning, and the major had left me. Or maybe I was too out of it to he couldn't wake me up, maybe, I don't know. But I don't ever know who he was, because I probably would beat him up. Because he left me there. And knowing the Germans were going, as a matter of fact, they left. They were retreating. We were retreating. The Germans were succeeding in breaking through our lines at Bastogne. And I've got it dressed finally. Not dressed, but I got up. I never undressed, but I went and opened the front door of this farmhouse, and right there in the front door out there was a German tank. On top of the tank was a German driver of the tank laying across. He had tried to get out of the tank, and his head was in the snow. Total decapitation. Well, I walked around it, and then I went, and somehow or another I'm getting confused here, but I got behind German lines again, but then I got out of that somehow or another, and spent the night at another farmhouse, and they were still there. And they were friendly. They were Belgian people. And they put me in their barn. And they said, "We got a lot of champagne out there." I said, "Thank you, no, no, no. I've had enough of that stuff." Well, I came out through the French underground and got to Paris, which was in American hands then. And I don't know what happened. I do know that I think I'm the only person on my crew that ever flew again. And you wonder, I'll tell you this now, the pilot of my crew slept in a Quonset hut with me, and he slept in the cot right next to mine. And he was so traumatized. I asked you, were we scared? See, I don't know how to answer that. Seemingly, we behaved almost silly. Can you urinate? You know. But he wet the bed every night back in England. He got back alive. And he screamed at night. And I used to have to go shake him and wake him up. Art, wake up, don't do that. I asked the colonel, send him back to the United States. He said, you know he can't fly. I've been, this was months later now. And I just, they said he will go back to the United States if he can take a B-17 and just fly it around the base one time. Well, Art said, I think I can do that. And would you fly right seat? Because you have to have two of them in that. I said, Art, I'm not the pilot. I'm not a pilot. And I remember telling that pilot in the Shreveport that I promised never to fly an airplane, or try to fly an airplane, because I couldn't. I said, I'll go with you. He said, fine. So they gave us an old B-17, and we went down the runway, and Art pulled it back. We got up about 500 feet, and he just, I can't do it, I can't do it. He put his head, showed his head. Well, I knew enough because I had come, on a couple of occasions, I would fly, coming home to England from a bomb raid later. I would sit up there and drive it. It just drove like a big 18-wheel truck kind of thing. Did that. So I knew to pull back on, push the wheel forward, pull it down and get the gasoline thing, and back them slowly off. It was about 500 feet above, over a farmer's field, plowed field. And first thing we know, and Art had fortunately lifted wheels of the B-17 up into, raised them up. Had done that, otherwise we'd have been bad, because we hit now on the bottom of this plane. And we started skidding in the mud, and finally one of the wings hit a tree, and that stopped us. But we sent Art home to the United States then, fortunately for him. And they sent all of us to a special hospital down on the coast of England when we came back from having jumped out. And they tested me and so forth, said, "You're all right, you can go back to your base." So they said, the people from our base said, 8th Air Force wants you because your education and your previous military experience. We want you to go to special training and become a lead navigator. I said, good Lord, where's the compass? So I went to lead navigator school, and I never saw my crew again for my first ship. And after I got out of lead navigator school, it was good. I learned that. I turned out to be a good navigator. And I joined another crew. Now, on that crew of 9 men, 3 officers and 6 listed men, none of us were over 20 years old. And we were on a lead ship, which meant we were going to lead 60 B-17s behind us. And I did mission after mission after mission over Germany doing that. I tell you, the first time on my new crew that I was going to fly as a lead, I wasn't going to fly lead. The base commander, a colonel, was going to be the lead B-17, and we were going to fly on his wing. We got out over the English Channel, and he called us on the radio and said, "We got an engine trouble. We're going to abort the mission and go back to England." And our new pilot was named Charlie. "Charlie, can you handle it?" Charlie said, "John, do you know where we are?" Well, I said, "Yeah, I do know where we are." But we were on, he was doing a diversion thing to lose time. He was ahead of schedule. So we were flying toward Norway. Odd way to get to Germany. But no, we were flying there. I said, "I think we can do it." So here, now you see there, nobody's over 20 years old. This is our first mission, and we got 60 B-17s behind us. But we did, and we got back, and we did fine. Now, I'm going to jump ahead. I think Lynn wants me to hurry up and finish. Huh? Well, no, I got to. Can y'all wait and do just a little more? I want to get to a point of issue here. We have right now going on all this business about Putin is guilty of war crimes. And then they make it a big deal. Is he guilty of what? Fratricide? Genocide. Is he guilty of genocide? Well, and even they're so ignorant of history. The night before last or something, they were saying on television, listen, he is doing things, and this war crimes that has been in existence for centuries. We know not to shoot women and children and all that kind of stuff. Wrong. Do you know that the head of the British Air Force, the Royal British Air Force, published a book in 1938 saying if we, at the Battle of Britain that was going on right after that, and he said, what we got to do is take the Air Force and bomb the German cities and kill their civilians. And Churchill agreed to it. And they did. The British Air Force only flew missions at night when they couldn't see the ground. We had the most sophisticated piece of equipment called the bomb Norton. It was the Norton bomb sight. And it was a piece of equipment about that big. And the bombardier had it right in the glass nose of the plane, like that. And my job would be to stand behind him when we were on it and get him down the right path. And then at the last minute, the pilot would turn a switch upside, and this Norton bomb sight would be guiding the airplane over the mission, exactly as what the data that we had put into it. Well, the English people killed and a lot of German lay people, women and children. And I'm worried about this. Do you realize that now they're trying to get our president to join in this group that says Putin has got to be held accountable for the atrocities that he's doing. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that saying Putin has a point. Well, he doesn't, but the English people killed a lot of people, and do you know what we were told? And we had all this fancy bomb sight. Do it. Said if you've got clouds under you and you can't use this, do not bring your bombs back to England. Drop them on the German towns. We did it. We bombed a lot of times German towns, killing women and children. After the war, I went and finished LSU and went to the University of Chicago to work on a master's degree in history. And I lived at the International House where foreign students lived and some Americans, me included. And I was living rooming with a person from Sweden who was not in the war. He'd never been to the war. I went up to my room after supper one night, and he was there with two other men. We were all 23 years of age by then. And he says they were the Germans. They were in the German army. They're friends of mine. I said, yes, sir. He said, yes, we were on the Russian front. And they said, what were you doing? I said, I was in the 8th Air Force, flew out of England on B-17s. Did you ever bomb Frankfurt, Germany? Several times, I said. The railroad yards? Yes, exactly. Our parents were killed in those raids. This German soldier was as close to my face as my hand, with his eyes looking squarely at me, as if to say, you bastard, you killed my parents. I may have. So, war has been terrible, and I think a lot of the news, you see, America has never joined the war court, crimes court in Nuremberg. We never had joined that. Can you imagine what would happen if the Germans had won? And so they would put George Patton in Nuremberg there to be tried for war crimes or genocide, which Patton was quite capable of doing. Interesting thought. One last story, then. On one raid way over toward Czechoslovakia, we gotten up high. I said a B-17 doesn't fly above 30,000 feet very well. And we were going, and the clouds were pushing us up. And we got into clouds, and then you'd come out of the clouds. These were cumulus clouds, big puffy clouds. And then you'd come out, and then you could see. Well, the pilot had told us, we go into a series of clouds here, so disperse. Don't just go wing on wing. You'll hit somebody. So we all dispersed. We came out, and in front of us, about from where the church is, about that far away, and immediately everybody said it's a German plane, bomber. And they started unleashing these 50 caliber machine guns on our ship, into that ship. And finally smoke came out of that ship. We had hit it good. And it started its swirling down and circling. And as soon as it started circling, it was a B-17. We had shot down our own ship. We saw them finally bail out. But over there, they would never get back to England. And the Germans were everywhere down below. Well, we didn't talk much going back to England that day, because everybody realized it was the B-17 that we'd taken down. We got back to England, and being a lead ship, our 3 officers were into debriefing by the colonel of the base. He always had a bottle of whiskey and would pour a jigger for the debriefing, let you take a jigger of whiskey and talk. You would describe the raid and what you did. And we said, well, sir, we have to tell you, we shot down a B-17. He reached over and got his bottle of whiskey, poured us. Now I'm contrasting this with what America does now in the military. There are people at Guantanamo base, isn't that in Cuba? Yeah, who are down there being tried because over in Iraq or something, they mistakenly saw some people down there and shot them, and now they're under arrest to be dishonorably discharged out of the military for the very same thing we did. Shoot your own people. Well, we didn't know what was to happen. We knew certainly we would not be a lead ship anymore after that. But about 4 or 5 days, we were called up. We were going to fly the next day. Well, we know we'd be back, and we'd be in the ship behind the lead ship, whoever that would be. Well, we went in and they said, "You're leading today." We are? Yeah. And the colonel wants to talk to you. So we went in and sat down with him, and he said, "Now, you're leading the group, and you're going to be the lead ship. But I got a call last night from headquarters that our group is leading the entire 8th Air Force. You'll have 1,000 B-17s behind you. Take them in. You're good. Take them in. Bring them home." Reestablishing trust and confidence in us who felt we had done a horrible thing, which we did, a horrible thing. But you see what he did? He's trusting the untrustworthy. Not terribly different from a Nazarene carpenter who says to the leper, "You are not unclean to me." The way he treated defeated people, that colonel knew what he was doing. And well, I guess that's plenty enough for today. I think, yeah. I mean, for anything I've really left out. No, well, doesn't matter. Good, all right.
You were brave.
Thank you. Good, thank you. Okay, good, peace.